20 Macs for 2020. I'm Jason Snell with Stephen Hackett, and this is, for my money, the best hardware design Apple has ever done. It's the iMac G4, and there it is. Stephen, there it is.
It's right here. You've got one
I do.
somewhere
It's back there.
in your office?
It's an art
Yeah.
object. I mean, they're just beautiful. This is
They
and
are.
what a hard act to follow. You know, you wrote the book on it. The iMac G3 is so incredibly popular. So groundbreaking in design in its own way, but also weighted down, like literally, by the constraints of having a big CRT display
Right.
at the center of it.
Yeah.
Whereas this has a floating flat screen at the center of it. And Apple thought about doing a flat screen iMac in the G3 era, and they decided it wasn't ready for prime time, and they were just going to focus on the CRT. And then this is what they came up with. It's a real triumph. The chrome arm, the floating panel, and then the little volleyball computer thing at the bottom is fine too, I guess. But it's really that arm and that floating panel that this computer's all about.
Yeah, I mean, you can articulate it basically any way you want. You can tilt it up and down. You know, you can like do this. You can have it up high. You can have it straight. And this is one finger. And this computer is probably 17 years old at this point. Like it's still an amazing feat of design. And yeah, it is so radically different from the iMac that came before it. When they introduced it, the idea that Steve Jobs presented was,
we have been working on this for 2 years. This is the best thing I think we've ever done. The move to flat screens we recognized early on is going to be the biggest single change in desktop computers in the next decade. And we realized that we had the opportunity of the decade to reshape desktop computers. We could have taken our iMac and taken a hacksaw to it, chopped off the back. So we're going to put a flat display on the front. Who needs the back? There are some fatal flaws in this approach. With the flat screen in the front, you notice it's not very flat anymore, is it? Because we've glommed the back on with all the rest of the stuff. This approach is far less than great, and we rejected it. And then we had our big idea. And the big idea was that rather than glom these things all together and ruin them all, why don't we let each element be true to itself? If the screen is flat, let it be flat. If the computer wants to be horizontal, let it be horizontal. And we came up with a radically new design. It is a technical tour de force. And it has a beauty and a grace that is going to last the next decade.
Now, of course, they followed this with the iMac G5, which had all the computer, back here. But at that point, the technology let them do that. But yeah, this was a short-lived iMac. It didn't really, while it's extremely popular and everyone loves it, it didn't really sell in the volume that the G3 and then honestly the G5 would either. But it is cool. I agree with you. This is my favorite Mac design of all time.
This, I feel like, is the first moment in Apple history where they got exactly what they wanted in terms of their vision. Like, honestly, draining the color out of it, it's just white. That seems very Johnny Ive, right? How could he even find one in the white room that he lives in? I don't even know.
Yeah.
And then having it be all about the materials, right? Like they said, design is how it looks, it's how it works, but it's using the materials available at the time. And this was the moment where they could put a flat screen in a desktop computer and just lean into that concept. And it's beautiful. And it kind of couldn't last, right? Because the screens kept getting bigger, and just the physics of it, you're not going to be able to magically suspend a 24-inch flat screen on an arm like that. And if you look at like the Surface Studio today, it sort of pivots on two supports to kind of come up and down. It's not at all like that what the G4 iMac was able to do.
Yeah, they did make a 20-inch version of this, and most of those are pretty droopy by now. It's got gearing and all sorts of stuff in here. Now, this is not too unlike the arm in the Pro stand that comes with the Pro Display XDR if you have an extra $1,000. But this is, I love every angle of it. The vents are up here, so the fan exhausts it out of the top. All the I/O is around the back, so all your cables can run back and behind the desk. And it really was a piece of art. These showed up. I remember them showing up in offices and all these other places that wouldn't necessarily be drawn to the Mac, but because this was a design object, it said something about the office and company that had it. by having this at reception or having this on the salesperson's desk. And I think Apple did really well for itself in that, even though it was short-lived. I mean, I'm gonna go out on a limb here.
Ooh.
This is the most iconic Mac design of all time. Not just our favorite, but I think anyone who sees this, who was around in the early 2000s, will say, "Oh yeah, that's something Apple made." And you can't say that about the MacBook Pro today, right? You can't say that about a lot of Macs. This thing, though, is just special as all get out.
Yeah, it's either that or the original Mac. I mean, I think those are the only two choices that are relevant. And we've lived with the modern iMac for a very long time now, having this floating screen design, but it's floating on a stand. And I appreciate the idea that it makes the computer disappear entirely. The volleyball at the bottom of the iMac G4 is very present and heavy and dense and larger than you'd think. But the trade-off is that the screen isn't as effortless as the screen is on that, even with the tapered, more modern iMacs, as opposed to the giant wedge of the original like G5 iMac. It's not the same. I've got my iMac on an arm and it's great, but it's unwieldy because it's big. So like, I wouldn't go back to a 17-inch display, right? I wouldn't, and that's the truth of it, and that's why we don't have an iMac like the iMac G4 anymore, is that the screen was more important. And I don't think Apple was wrong to make the computer disappear entirely and make the iMac all screen. I think that was probably the right call, but I do feel like we lost something. Maybe what I need is somebody to make a really nice desk arm that's much more kind of powerful and fancy like the G4. Maybe that would do it.
That'd be cool.
It's probably physically impossible, but I like to dream. But in the meantime, you and I both have these in positions of prominence in our offices because they're beautiful. Like I've got a lot of Macs that are like you, filed away on a shelf on a metal shelving in a row. They're not as fancy as your shelf for your Mac collection, but this one, along with the original Mac, it's a position of prominence because it's a beautiful thing.
It really is.
All right, yay, it's the iMac G4 in 20 Macs for 2020, and we'll be back next week with another one. Until then, bye, Steven.
Bye, Jason.